mjadala huu sasa utakuwa na lugha zote mbili, kwa hivyo utakuwa na kuchanganya hapa na pale kwa lugha ya Kiingereza na Kiswahili kwa faida ya diaspora na wale wanafuatilia mahali pengine. Karibu sana Anita, sasa endelea.
Asante sana. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. With you here is Anita, and I'll be moderating this session. I work at Upper Network and Elite Bookstore. I'm the operations manager of Elite Bookstore. I will do the introduction of the panel in English, and then I will allow the panel to discuss in whatever language they're comfortable in. So there will be a mix of Swahili and English. With us here, we have Professor Abdul Sherif. He is a history professor at the University of Dar es Salaam. He is the member of the Zanzibar Stone Town Advisory Board. Sherif's main field of investigation have been research on the culture of the Indian Ocean. He's a researcher of history and the culture of Zanzibar. Next to Professor Abdul is Diana Kamara. Diana Kamara is a PhD candidate at the Makerere Institute of Social Research. Her research interests include gendered readings of African fashion and textile. She's a painter, a poet, essayist, and an African textile enthusiast. And lastly, I have Jane Shussa. Jane Shussa is a digital communication specialist and columnist for the Citizen newspaper, where she does weekly book reviews, and she's also a very good traveler, and she loves coffee. She's a coffee lover. Now, to begin this panel, first I would like to say this is an amazing book. Tulikipenda sana wote ambao tumepata muda wa kukisoma, na tulifurahia kazi ya iliyofanywa na Dr. Ida na mama yake, kwa sababu imeonyesha preservation of history, of culture, lakini pia it has shown the richness of the coast, how much the coast had to offer, na sisi kama Watanzania labda tulikuwa hatuhijui sana. Kwa hiyo tumeweza kujua vitu vingi sana katika kitabu hichi. Naweza kuanza na wewe Professor Sherif. Gentlemen first. It's ladies first always, lakini I'll start with you. What struck you in the book? What made an impact to you in the book?
Well, I will speak in English because I've become used to speaking for a long time on this. To start with, that in the introduction, everything was said as he's a professor of this university, and and of the museum as well. In every case, it should be the past. I'm no longer, for many years now, unfortunately, to some extent, I have not been it. But what I can say, that I'm a historian at heart and in every kind of way. And I would concentrate on one issue that has come up from the previous speakers who came here, particularly about the culture of the Swahili. And I'll give my own history, how I came to this understanding. I was in University of California, Los Angeles, when I started to do my master's degree. And I was thinking now, what should I study? What should I do research on? And it was, at that time, I happened to read one of the books published by the Russians, the communist period at the time, and they were talking about West Africa, and they were doing a lot of research on Africa. One of the people who began to do a lot of research on Africa in the 1960s were the Russians, partly for political reasons. But they began to publish a book every year in which they would give the results in English to the general reader of what they are finding out. And in reading one of those books, there was one article in which he said, I'm going to talk about the Sahel region of West Africa. I said, well, that's interesting. Sahel. We know where Sahel is. Sahel is the area between the forest and the desert. The desert of the desert there, and the West African green areas. And he said, you know that area in between, it is called Sahel. And I said, yeah, so what? Sahel is not a place which divides the desert from the forest. It is an area which unites it, because this is where people come from both sides and mingle there and create a new culture. And suddenly, since I came from the Swahili coast, I said, that is the meaning of Sahel. That was my first realization of what this means. The Sahel is a place where the desert meets the sea, or the sea meets the dry ground. And I said, this is the fundamental principle of the culture of the Swahili coast, because this is precisely where the sea meets the land. Very often we tend to think, even the Europeans who are writing all the time, they were always talking about, oh, civilization came from across the sea here, as if it is a one-way street. What happens when you study Swahili culture is that it is the coming together, creation of a new hybrid that will not make sense if you divide it. And I said, well, this is a good thing to take to study for my master's, for my PhD. And at that time, I got a scholarship to go to London, to do it there at the University of London. And at my first presentation, this is precisely what I said. I said, I want to study the Swahili civilization in terms of the meeting of Africa with the Indian Ocean. And the big professor at that time, and these were still English professors, there were no African professors still at that time. When I made my presentation that this is what I want to study, this professor very proudly came and said, this is not the kind of history we do here. And he killed it right there. I'm a very young professor, and I'm a scholar just coming up, and I was asked to do something else. So the only thing else, I said, okay, I will do economic history of East Africa. But he did not erase what is inside me. And that has actually been the standard of my study of the Swahili culture. That if you look at the East African coast, you have these islands, Zanzibar, Pemba, Kilwa, all of these islands. And then the coast itself is part of it. Whether you take Mombasa, Lamu, and so on. All of these are composite civilizations, but they make sense only when you consider it in combination and to see how they come together. And I think actually the life histories that the ladies who preceded us talked about. The mother was Indian, the father was one of the African tribes. They themselves, they had neighbors who were Indians. They went to see the cinema as their favorite activity, and therefore to study the history of Zanzibar itself and of the whole Eastern coast will not make sense unless you are able to really see how they intermingle and they become one. So I do not know how long that I will talk, but this is the general principle underlying my study of history since then.
Thank you very much. I think you laid a very good foundation to our conversation today, because our conversation is all about showing the richness of the coast and how much Salama, as just one of the stories, contributes a lot to how much the coast intermingled and how much it was rich, but still yet most of us did not know a lot of what was happening in the past. I'm coming to you, Diana. What's your perspective on what he said, and please can you say what struck you in the book?
Thank you. Maybe just to take from what he said, one thing that Salama says, she knows definitely for sure that civilization, the center of civilization ni Unguja. Unguja ndio kituo, ndio mahali ambapo utamaduni unatoka. Kwa hiyo watu wengine wote wanazunguka katika ulimwengu wake yeye, Unguja is everything. Anajua kuna London, kuna India, kuna nini, lakini Unguja ndio hasa mahali ambapo utamaduni unatoka. Ndio maana hata yeye alipoulizwa kuhusu kwamba Waarabu ndio huja kutupa sisi ustaarabu, akasema hapana, Waarabu wengine wakitoka huko kwao hawajastaarabika, wakifika hapa Afrika Mashariki ndio sisi tunawastaarabisha. So I think just to comment on what he said, I think what struck me is that she has a very resilient spirit. A lot of things happened in her life. She lost her father, then she loses her husband, and I think then later she loses her son. But there is just a resilience in this woman and the determination. So she will always come up with a scheme to find a way. So she finds a midway with the grandfather. She cannot sit with the grandfather. Now she finds a way to sit. She cannot go to school. She finds a way to read. She will always find a way. I think this is the kind of a motivational book that men especially should be reading. Not Napoleon and the stuff. I mean, all of us should have this as an inspiration. There is a resilience in this woman. And I think she understood the only constant thing they say about life is change. She embraced it and went with it, She moves, they move houses, she moves to Zanzibar, starts anew, later decides to move to Bara and start anew. So there's just so much resilience. And if we were saying it from reading the book, lakini simewasikia watoto wake wakiongea hapa, kwamba she's very resilient and determined. So I think the thing that struck me most is her resilience.
Over to you, Jane. Yeah, nini ambacho kimekustrike in the book?
Okay, asante sana. Kitu kikubwa ambacho nimekipenda katika kitabu kwanza ni malezi ya familia nzima, kuanzia binti Mbwana mpaka Salama ilivyoelewa, mpaka amekuja kulea watoto wake tulisikia hapa. Lakini pia unaweza kuona namna ambavyo binti Mbwana kwanza, mamake Salama, jinsi ambavyo ameweza kuelezea kwanza maisha yake, namna ambavyo alikuwa akitegemea marafiki, sisterhood and friendship katika kuishi maisha yake ya kila siku. Tunaona pia kwamba alipopoteza mume wake wa kwanza, alikaa muda mrefu sana bila kuolewa tena. Alikuwa hataki kuolewa, lakini baada ya muda, kwa sababu ya kipindi hiko, mwanamke ukiwa kujaolewa unakuwa hauna uhuru wa kufanya vitu. Kwa sasa ikamlazimu kuolewa tena ili apate uhuru wa kuweza kukutana na marafiki zake, kuweza kuenda kwenye sherehe mbalimbali, kitu ambacho pia tunakuja kukiona kwa Salama upande wa kutengeneza marafiki pia. Sasa tofauti ambayo ilikuwepo kati ya Salama na binti bwana ilikuwa ni kwamba binti bwana alikuwa kwenye dini hasa ya kutengeneza marafiki, lakini Salama tunaona namna ya kutengeneza marafiki ilikuwa ni kutokana na zile interests ambazo walikuwa nazo kati ya yeye na marafiki zake. Wanaenda kwenye sinema, wanatoka sinema wanazungumzia fashion, wanatoka hapo lakini wakirudi wanazungumzia filamu ambazo wameziona, na katika mazungumzo yao wanajaribu kurelate yale waliyoona katika sinema na maisha yao ya kila siku. Lakini pia kitu kingine ambacho nilipenda ni kuona namna ambavyo waandishi waliweza kuelezea historia ya Zanzibar hasa wakati wa mapinduzi. Tumeona vitu vingi sana vimetokea ambavyo binafsi nilikuwa sivifahamu, lakini niliposoma kitabu nimeweza kuelewa kwa kina kwamba okay, kumbe wakati wa mapinduzi kulikuwa kuna vitu ambavyo vimetokea. Tuliona kakake Salha yes alipitia wakati mgumu sana katika kitabu, na unaweza kuangalia pia kama nilivyosema ile roho ya uthubutu. Alikuwa akiamini kwamba anaweza kusaidia watu wengine, lakini katika activism yake alikuwa hazungumzi na watu wale wa tabaka la juu. Alikuwa anasaidia tabaka la chini kabisa, watu waliokuwa wanaishi ng'ambo, ambao ni wale peasants na nini, vitu kama hivyo. Tuliona Salha alienda shule, mwalimu akamwambia kaka yako anafanya hiki na hiki. So Salha amerudi nyumbani, anamuuliza kaka yake, niambie ukweli. Basi kaka yake akamalizia ukweli, hakumdanganya. Kwa ilionyesha pia namna ambavyo kama familia wamelelewa, lakini pia namna ambavyo mpaka wanafikia kuondoka Zanzibar kwenda bara. Lakini pia tunaona namna ambavyo mihangaiko na misukosuko inaweza kumbadilisha mtu. Kwa hiyo nilipenda sana vitu kama hivyo, na nadhani ni watu wengi wanahitaji kusoma kitabu hiki kwa sababu inasaidia kujua historia ya sehemu tumetoka.
How impactful is it to this generation, and how do you think how can you resonate with that? Because back in the day there was oral storytelling, there was poem, there was poetry, a lot of it, and there was taarab, going to dances, there was tarika, there was going to different tarikas. Religion played a very big role during Salama's time, but also music played a big role during her time. Also the oral storytelling that we get to read this book because of the storytelling that happened. How is it applied to this day, and how was it the storytelling during that time ilileta impact gani? Let's start with Professor Sherif.
I think let's start with something else.
Okay, let's start with you, Diana.
So there are two things. There is oral traditions, is a whole strand that stands by itself, and then there is oral history, and they complement each other. What we've just heard about kuongea familia is what we call oral history. Now, part of the making of Salama was her ability to remember things, na kuweza kuhifadhi mashairi nini. I only think that I think this is a book for us as a new generation to read, because we think fashion, sisi ndo tunavumbua, sisi ndo tunajua. Mimi nilipokuwa nakuwa miaka ya 90, dada zetu walikuwa na madaftari, wanaandika nyimbo za Westlife, wanabandika picha nini, na mimi nilikuwa najua madaftari ya Musa. Sasa wakati wa kina Salama, wao wa kwanza wanakariri wimbo, halafu ndo baadaye wanakuja wanausikia. So uhifadhi ni sehemu muhimu sana ya kuwa kwenye kuwa fashionable pia, lakini just not taarab and oral history. Fashion in general, fast fashion is not a new phenomenon. This is what makes us as Swahili people cosmopolitan. kuna habari za kina Kubra kule Kilwa, the fashionistas wanavaa kila nguo, kila kitu kinachotoka. Kuna habari za vijana kule Unguja, anavaa kila nguo, kila fashion anaenda nayo. So it's not just Arab and oral history, but also other ways of being fashionable. So having an active memory that remembers things, poems, was part of it, but it is part of being young, being youthful, and belonging. So to be fashionable, you needed to remember these things. Thank you very much.
From who did we learn about our culture, about our stories and all that kind of thing? And actually, my family is of Indian origin. But I learned all my Layla from our workers in the home. It was very, we were very eager at night to go down there where there was our guard at night to listen to all the stories of Layla. I didn't hear from my father, but from the local workers. And I think this kind of integration of the society that occurred particularly in Zanzibar, the way that I was going. Swahili, I never learned Swahili formally in the class, because in the class we were required, oh, you are Indian, you take Gujarati. You are Arab, you take Arabic, or something like that. And there was this, the British system that they had established to divide and rule. And that worked successfully. But in the street, we could speak any language. We used to play with our neighbors and so on of all. And the common language was Swahili among many. One other thing that I just told to Zanzibar, I come from Zanzibar. I'm very proud to be a Zanzibari myself. But Zanzibar was not always the center of the Swahili civilization. Zanzibar became a center only in the 19th and 20th century. 19th century, mostly. 20th century, the British and the Germans were already ruling. So, previously, there's a long history going back 2,000 years, long before Zanzibar came up, where other towns, places like Mombasa, Lamu, and so on, which was the major centers. Oh, Kilwa, of course. Kilwa was one of the major centers. So when we talk about Swahili culture or something like this way, it is not focused on Zanzibar alone. It is the whole coast itself where the two environments meet and create a civilization.
Thank you so much, Professor. We are running out of time, and I would love Jane to just do the final word. Like, if you have something, just finish it up. That we may.
So, thank you so much. I think my final thing would be to first appreciate the work that has been done to write this book, because I believe that we need to tell our own stories, and I feel like this is a good place to start. And I believe that hichi kitabu kitaweza kuwa ni sehemu ya kuanzia kwa watoto wa sasa hivi ambao hawajui historia kwa kiasi fulani. Itakuwa ni sehemu ya kuanzia, lakini pia kitu kingine, malezi ambayo tunawalea watoto wetu ni sehemu muhimu sana ya kuweza kuandaa kwa namna ambavyo tunataka wawe wakikua. Tunaona namna ambavyo Salama aliweza kuwakuza watoto wake. Alikuwa ni mtu ambaye haruhusu mtu wa nje amfanyie maamuzi. Kitu ambacho naona pia hata Madam Zakia alisema hapa, alikataa kwenda shule kwa sababu she knew what she wanted and she said it, and mamake anasikiliza. So I think it's also really important for parents to listen to the kids. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, our distinguished panelists, for your time. I'm sorry we had to cut you short. Our time is not very enough, but I would like to conclude that With this panel, I think you've seen that our culture is rich, and Salama's book has shown us that there is a lot that the coastal culture has, and it is a rich culture. So I would like to thank you all of you for listening, and I would like to thank our panel for whatever you contributed in this discussion. And if you'd like, it is upon us to be tuwe wahifadhiji wa kazi hizi za historia. Na tunakuaje watu wa kuhifadhi hizi kazi? Ni kwa kusoma vile vitabu ambavyo vimeandikwa. Kwa hiyo ukipata muda, nunua kitabu chako, uwe pia katika watu wanaohifadhi historia hii. Asanteni sana.
Asante sana. Makofi tafadhali.